For tuning in. And thank you for joining us this evening, to talk about a career in finance for young accountants, budding accountants, or even established accountants. Just a quick introduction. I am Rauf. So I studied accounting at UIA, and then qualified as a chartered accountant. Worked in the Big Four for a number of years, for about 5 to 6 years, and now I'm in pursuit of something else. Together with me, I've got Hanis, who's co-hosting as well. So interesting enough, Hanis actually qualified as a chartered accountant just yesterday, and is starting that
Actually,
journey.
I just finished. Just got the result yesterday lah. Yeah.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
So just a brief one on the format for tonight. I believe as and when all of you registered, you would have submitted your questions. And we've received those questions. So we'll try our best to surround the conversation around these questions. And then at about 10 p.m. with half an hour to go, we'll probably get some questions from the audience for Rafizi to answer. And largely, really, these questions, they surround, for example, questions regarding Rafizi's background, regarding professional accounting qualifications, skills required in the industry or to be in the industry, the future of accounting vis-a-vis technology, work-life balance, governance, so on and so forth. And to talk about all of this, of course, we have Rafizi. I believe he needs no introduction, but perhaps just a quick background about Rafizi. So Rafizi graduated with a degree in electrical and electronics engineering in the UK. And subsequently, after a 3-year stint with a firm in the UK, he qualified as a chartered accountant. And then he went on to establish his career with Petronas. And at the age of 27, he was heading Petronas's petrochemical planning business, managing various assets within the business, and subsequently went on to head Petronas's international upstream operation, overseeing the finance function of the ONG operations in 34 countries around the globe. He then, of course, went on to become a GM at Pharma Niaga, one of Malaysia's largest pharmaceutical conglomerates, and then infamously joined politics and was a member of parliament. And in June 2016, he founded Invoke, a data firm specializing in data analytics and artificial intelligence products for Malaysia as well as the regional markets. So perhaps we can kickstart off from here. Again, using the questions to drive the discussion. So Rafizi, perhaps we can start off by you sharing with a degree in engineering, what made you pursue a career in finance, even in ICW qualification for that matter.
Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and evening, I suppose. It's been a long time that I speak to people, so it's I don't know. I have not the skill to speak to a large group of people. I actually had always wanted to do something else, not engineering. I actually wanted to do history after school because that's my real interest. But obviously the scholarship system in Malaysia wouldn't allow it. So if you were pure science students, then you had to take engineering courses. So I had two offers then. EXO wanted me to do geology. So I sat down with the senior geologist from ExxonMobil then, and I asked him, what was it like to be a geology? So he said that, in the first year you have to memorize 100 stones. Second year, distraction. Second year you have to memorize another 100 stones and so on. So that rule of geology. So I took Petronas to do electrical and electronics engineering because that was the least engineering of all compared to mechanical, chemical. But even as early as the first year, sorry, Ben, can you go there, Ben? Because you can't get crash this one. Okay, you can get crash anything else, but not this one. Even from my first year, and this is something that I think is very important from earlier on. You have to plan your career from as early as you leave school. So even in my first year, I started talking to people who have already worked, finding out what is it like, and career progression, Petronas, because I had to go back to Petronas because I was a scholar. I kind of know from the very beginning, though I enjoyed engineering and I did very well in engineering. But in most companies in Malaysia, you didn't do engineering per se. You basically manage contractors because most of the engineering work will be done or outsourced to contractors. So if I were to come back as electronic engineers, that means that I would handle mostly tenders and scheduling of maintenance rather than actual proper electronic planning or electronic work. Plus, on top of that, I couldn't imagine myself working as an engineer. So I kind of know that the career progression as electronic engineer in Petronas wouldn't have been, that lucrative. I also knew by the time I was in first year that electronic was a sunset industry in Malaysia because although it was the top ones in the 80s and 90s, by the late 90s, all the manufacturing was shifting somewhere else. So I had to decide what I wanted to do, and it's not so much that I wanted to be accountant, to be frank, but it was the most pragmatic thing to do because I asked this question: what was it that I was good at, and what would be the end game that I wanted to be 20, 30 years down the line. I've always wanted to be my own boss more than anything else. It doesn't matter what I end up doing. I just didn't want to work for anyone else. So most probably that means that you either become CEO or you run your own business. So then you work backwards and figure out what was it that I was good at. I was good at maths. I was good at physics and maths. I love numbers. But I was also quite good, with public speaking. I can sell anything, even at that age. So, and once you mesh that with the career trajectory in Petronas, and it was very obvious that the only option to do was to become a CA, because Petronas back then put a lot of emphasis, almost a kind of privilege for CAs, especially ICAW. And during my time, you couldn't do ICAW anywhere else but UK or one or two other countries. I think only Hong Kong and Singapore. So back then, I had no choice. I had to do ICAW lah. And Petronas only allowed that I switch course from coming back to become electronics engineer to CA. To something else if I become a chartered accountant. So, all this just to give you, some background that it wasn't that I had interest in finance or accounting from the very beginning. It was pragmatism all along. And if you want to grow in your career, you really have to be pragmatic. It's not really what I like, what I don't like. It's about knowing what I will be good at and how to use that strength that you are good at and to find a match in the best career trajectory that can bring you to what you wanted to be in 20, 30 years time. So it requires a lot of planning from the very beginning. So that's how I ended up. So even, in the middle of my second year, I've already made up my mind. I wasn't going to practice as engineer. And I started applying for positions in audit firms since my second semester in I think in second year. And even then, looking back, I was quite careful to make sure that as best as possible, I shouldn't go to big firms. Because I was an engineer, and if you go to Big Four or even the next top 5, in the UK, even worse in Malaysia, even in the UK, the emphasis is always about clients, and I think less emphasis on giving you the breadth of training. So if you come from a different background, like myself, engineering, and you had to start from scratch, learning the debit credit, even choosing the firm that you want to train is important because you have to make sure that the firm will be able to give you the breadth of experience from audit to tax to business support to due diligence to consultancy, everything under one roof. And it cannot be too small, because if it's too small, then you wouldn't have had all this breadth of experience. It cannot be too big, because if it's too big, then they couldn't care less about you. It's too big for them to allow you to do everything. So you will end up just doing one section of the audit, maybe for 6 months for British Airways. So you may train at one big firm, but you are very good at just fixed assets, but you wouldn't have been able to cover many other things. So, the long and short of it, given the time, is that if you have not planned your career in your first year in university, you will struggle, because you should have planned it from your first year in university, and then after that continuously revisit and calibrate and revisit and calibrate, so that as you start working, you already executing the plan that you have, rather than figuring out what I want to do after third year starting your career.
Right. So since you mentioned planning is very important, and I believe bulk of the people here have already started their career, for example, right? What would you then advise, or how would you best advise them to start planning now, and how best would they be able to do it?
Okay. First of all, you must always start with an end in mind, and knowing where you want to end up requires knowing yourself first and foremost. So you have to know yourself, what kind of person you are. Conceptually, as an accountant or finance professionals, the broad categories at the top are either you are a specialist or whether you are business leaders. Specialists are basically people who just choose one area and then spend their time in that area and just go up in that. Being an audit firm, for example, is a specialist. Being a tax guy is a specialist. Being investment banker to a certain extent is a specialist. As opposed to people who start covering a wide range of finance functions in their career, from the operational finance, the APAR, the trade finance, and then most probably they would have covered financial accounting and financial reporting, and then they would have covered, you know, management reporting, budgeting, and then business planning, and then eventually taking control of the whole finance function and start running the business. And so you have to ask yourself whether you are you see yourself in 10, 15 years time as a specialist or a, you know, a business leader. So I remember my first week in audit firm, you know, that's discussion I had with my training partner, David Fobel. I remember his name. So David was very clear that, you know, we take you not to become an accountant, we take you as business leaders, but you have to decide whether you want to stay in assurance in professional firm or you want to go and join the industry. So they knew from the very beginning in the first week that I knew myself enough that, you know, I'm not an auditor. I wouldn't have liked it. It's because it's audit, for example, requires a certain type of person to have enjoyed it, because you work on other people's work. Basically, you are a compliance officer to make sure that whatever other people do complies with the statutory requirements, accounting standard, and so on. As opposed to those who are business leaders who go in, create things, and you know, drive business and create value. So these are two things that require completely different characteristics. So you have to start by knowing what are your strengths, what are your interests, so to speak, what's your end game, and then you will be able to say that, okay, this is what I want to end up in 10, 15 years time. And from there, you can start charting your career path. So take, for example, right? If you have chosen from the very beginning that you like audit, for whatever reasons, maybe because you are more academic, maybe because you like so-called looking at things, maybe you were a school prefect in school, so you like to make sure that everything is in order. So you would have known in the case of Malaysia, for example, that the work environment is bad. The work environment in audit is very bad. The attrition is very bad. The pay package compared to the long hours and everything that you have to go through is bad. But if you have made up your mind from the very beginning that you want to be a partner by the time you are 40, then you would have remembered those and you would have stayed. You would have basically focused on the motivation, because this is what I have always wanted all along. As opposed to, for example, people who feel that they are business leaders, they want to grow, basically they want to run companies, they want to run businesses, or they want to create their own ventures. Then you know enough that by the time you are 30, if your objective is to become CFO by the time you are 40, you should have known that by the time you are 30, you should have covered at least the 3 biggest functions of finance. So you should have done operational finance, which is APAR, and to a certain extent trade finance, depending. You should have done financial accounting and financial reporting. So you should have done GL and audit, you know, from company's perspective. And you should have been able to do management reporting as well as budgeting and business planning. If you have not covered this by the time you are 30, you will become too expensive to start learning beyond 30. So you would have then planned your career that you wouldn't stay too long in a single one function, so that you know, after 2.5 years, you move to the next one. After 2.5 years, you move to the next one. Even if that means that you have to change company, because getting those breadth of experience is actually more important, because you need to hit that milestone that by the time I'm 30, I would have covered the 3 main core functions. That doesn't include all the other things. That doesn't include corporate finance. That doesn't include taxation. That doesn't include raising funds, for example. But at least you should have covered all that. So it will also decide your planning. If you have planned it that well, you also know what companies to join and what companies not to join. Because as I mentioned earlier on, going to a certain companies will deny you some experience because it's either too big or too small. If it's too big, then you get stuck in one function for a long time. If it's too small, it just doesn't have the complexity to cover everything. So you would have known, for example, if your objective is very clear, that in certain circumstances, it's better not to join the big company. In certain circumstances, precisely you have to go to that company because maybe they are the only ones that can offer this kind of experience. So that by the time you are 30, you would have covered everything. Then at the very least, you become manager that manage the whole finance function, and you are, then you can focus on what is most important for a finance professional. It's not your accounting skill. It's not your audit, whatever. It's basically your business knowledge, because finance professionals are expected to create value. We hire you so that you can help us make money. I don't need accountants to just pose and just tell me, what's the audit like, what's the issue, because I could have outsourced it to India if that's the case. In fact, when I started my career, that's exactly the model of my firm back then in London. It's basically one part of the firm basically functions as outsourced accounting support for businesses, so that the business focus on your business and we do your backroom accounting. So if I want just to have accountants to do recording of transactions, then I should have outsourced it. But I hire and build my finance team, and the same with other companies, because I want them to play active role to help me create value. And creating value is not about transactions. It's not about recording, debit credit. It's not about audit issues. It's actually about really knowing the business. So if you have not covered the core accounting functions by the time you are 30, you wouldn't have had the time after that to really dive into knowing the business, because eventually those who will go up and hopefully become CFO are those who can rise up beyond just the technical accounting and finance knowledge, those who have demonstrated ability to run and create values for business by understanding the business and having that business knowledge. Those are the ones who will go up. The rest basically will remain becoming the backroom transactional accountant. So as you can see, these plannings all has to happen at quite earlier start of your career. If you miss 4 or 5 years, there's a lot that you need to catch up. So, but that's part of the reason that I agreed. When Takib and a few others asked me whether I'm willing to talk, because I don't think this is taught in school, and I don't think this is also taught in your firms or in companies. And a lot of what sharing my own experience, a lot of my sharings, usually most of your seniors and partners and your CFOs will not agree with me, because I would have encouraged you to be a lot more adventurous and to be a lot more focused and to be resolute in what you need to do. And that means that the first 10 years of your career is very much about learning more than anything else. Whereas it is in the best interest of your firms, of your companies, to just keep you where you are, because they have trained you and they want you to stay there. Because seeing you moving around most probably is like is a problem for them. So just to wrap up, if you haven't planned, you really need to have that roadmap, knowing what you want to do, whether you're going to be the specialist or you want to be the business leader creating value, and if so, what kind of specialties, and mentally be prepared for it, and have a milestone that I need to cover this by certain years. If I don't get it, or if I have covered it, no matter what I'm promised, or no matter how comfortable I am, If you need to move because you have to cover other areas before you are 30, you should. And that hopefully will provide you a clarity about what you should be doing, because then from 30 onwards is all about enriching yourself with business knowledge.
Right. So with regards to planning, when you did it, for example, right? I think most of us, if we were to plan, the question then would be, we might not have sufficient experience to know what's out there and to know how things work. So then the question is, how do we plan? So when you were doing your planning, did you plan it on your own, or did you have mentors who you spoke to, who have gone through all of these experiences to be able to guide you in terms of your planning?
Well, it's a combination of things. I don't have mentors. I'm quite skeptical, with this concept of mentors, because when I was at Petronas, or any big organization for that matter, sometimes mentors can be mistaken as trying to find a shortcut, a know-who thing rather than, and it's very difficult to find a superior who really cares about your career in any organization. So this concept that organization can offer you mentors who really will look after you and give you advice is actually really, really rare. So if you have that idea that I want to find a mentor, I mean, most probably it will not happen. What I did was this. There was Google, of course, although back then wasn't much Google lah. It's a Yahoo and the gang, but
Yep.
Try to find as much information from publicly available source as possible. But what you should do now, and the good thing about your generation is that social media is around, LinkedIn is around, there are so many avenues that were not available to us. What I found most useful for me then is to listen and to talk to elders. I was quite lucky because it's like I knew a lot of people, and there were a lot of seniors who had done different things. So I had seniors who were CAs, ICW. I had seniors who were doing in London. Even before I started, I had seniors who were already in Petronas or engineering or working in MNCs all over the world. So I constantly chat with them, find out with them, how is it like, and it's never about shortcuts. Never about how do I get up. How do I climb the corporate ladder very quickly? It's not that. It's just finding out what exactly things are, so that the information gathering is, to me, most useful if you connect with people who are already there and who are very genuine about just sharing. And that usually is better rather than having a mentor assigned to you in organization, because mentor arrangement in organization will become part and parcels of just work arrangements. It has less personal touch to it. So if you haven't done that, try to find those people, and you can just gate crash on LinkedIn nowadays. Just gate crash and ask whatever, and from the different experience, then you will be able to get more information. If you belong to a big organization, in my case, macam Petronas to you, I was quite lucky lah, because I got spotted much earlier on. So there was a lot of interest in my career. So people actually want to figure out what I wanted to do, because at some point, I suppose the concern was I would leave Petronas. I mean, true enough lah. After I served my bond, I left lah kan, but I didn't leave before I served my bond. So from the very beginning, there had always been a discussion between different team leaders or discipline leaders in Petronas about what I wanted to be, what was my career like. So those kind of discussions also help. And that's why in my case, for example, I was able to a certain degree to choose my career path in Petronas. So I may be the only one person then who had cover in that 7 years, corporate, downstream, and upstream, in all that short 7 years, and also finance, business planning, operational planning, some technology part as well. So, but there's no set answers about how do you go about planning. It's all about Googling. It's just Google and just filling the blanks. It's just about absorbing as much information as possible, and most of the time, the best form of information is from someone who has no ulterior motive in your career. I mean, if you ask him, he doesn't get anything out of you, and vice versa. So you've got to find those kind of people who have been there, who are there, and just try to get their opinion. And you have so much weight, the means to do that now is a lot more compared to back then, 20 years ago when I started.
Right. So touching on your point earlier, right, where you said in order for finance professionals to create value, they must at least cover certain functions. And naturally or typically the progression for accountants after graduating the degree or the professional qualification is to join an accounting firm or an audit firm. Would you say that it is necessary for them to cover these functions as preparers, or would it be good enough for them to come across some of these functions, know how business leaders potentially make decisions, so that down the road they would have the knowledge on how to make certain decisions? So they need not necessarily be preparing or doing that particular function, but I come across a function, I see how people do it, I see what are the decisions made, and by virtue of that, I have some form of knowledge which would enable me in making a decision. Yeah.
Are you asking me whether is it good enough just to be an auditor to learn all this, or you actually have to go to the other side in the industry and become financial accountants, GL accountant to
correct? Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
You won't like it, but I don't think you make a good accountant if the only thing you've done is just audits, and then you expect to go in and to run finance function. In fact, from my experience, those who spend 4 or 5 years in audit firm, they are quite bad when they start in finance function.
Okay, actually, okay.
Yeah.
Well, you are saying that actually when they have gone through training at audit firm, so actually now the problem is that, okay, we have like a lot of CAs nowadays, and then at some point of their life, actually they will think about, oh, okay, actually what are the actual skills that if they want to jump from audit firm to commercial, for example. So perhaps you can share with us what actually skills needed, and also actually does those chartered accountants actually differs from those who are not chartered accountants? Okay.
Okay. I mean, you have to see from different angles, right? Okay. First of all, we have to accept the reality of the industry. And the reality of an industry is such that it's almost like an old boys, old girls club, because most of the CFOs, at least, are qualified. So when most of the CFOs or CEOs or the big organizations are, MNCs, if the tradition and the hiring philosophy has always given weightage to qualified accountants, so yes, there is a premium to qualification. That is true. For example, I don't hire non-qualified accountants. I mean, I only take qualified accountants for the simple fact that if you can take someone qualified and non-qualified, you would always take the qualified ones. Okay, so that's the reality of the industry. What I think a lot of the younger ones, you guys don't understand, is that the landscape of accounting and finance profession in Malaysia has changed a lot in the last 20 years. When I did my ICAW, I think every year, there was only about 20 Malaysians who did ICAW. So it was very rare because, you know, we could only do it in the UK. So the number of qualified accountants then was very, very small comparatively compared to what you guys have now. So the competition was very low. So if you come back from UK with ICAW or ACCA qualified, you know, more or less you were like the top 20% of the finance in the industry. I don't know whether you guys realize now, it's no longer like that. As far as the industry is concerned, for every one vacancy, there'll be 10 finance graduates with a degree and another 10 ACCA qualified. So it's spoiled for choice. It's just that, you know, the country have been pouring money to produce so many qualified accountants in the last 10, 50, well, not even 10 years, 5, 6 years lah. Your generation lah mostly, I notice kan, with all this peneraju, tak teraju, whatever lah. But the supply has been fixed. The supply has been fixed, but the demand has not changed. The company has not changed. You know, the industry has not changed. So what it does then, it makes it a lot more competitive for even qualified accountants now to get a good job. That is not to say that qualification is no longer worth it. Unfortunately, for those, you know, I'm sorry if you don't like it. Unfortunately, for those who do not qualify, who have not got qualification, the reality is if a company has to choose between a qualified accountant and non-qualified, they will always take the qualified ones. Unfortunately, because there are so many qualified accountants nowadays, you guys become very cheap. I wouldn't pay, you know, I mean, I pay quite well compared to other people, but other companies, why should they pay something high when, you know, other people are willing to take the job, the same qualification with you at a much lower pay? So that makes it extremely competitive. And when it becomes competitive, it is no longer enough to say that I'm qualified and I spent 3 years at audit firm and therefore, you know, I should get this senior position or I should get a manager. It doesn't work like that anymore. As far as the business is concerned, I want to take someone, either you can run straight away or you are not too senior pay-wise, or you start at the starting point and I can teach you and you're not too expensive. So that's the problem nowadays, the dilemma for qualified accountants, those who are coming out from Intech lah, all these Sunways, because back then, 20 years ago, you know, you have no choice but to work in audit firm to be qualified, because you need them to sign off your qualification experience. It's no longer the case now. Audit firm is just one of the so many organizations in the country that can sign off your qualification. And ACCA has evolved so much since the 80s to the point that you don't even need to work in an authorized training organization. As far as I know, so long as you have a superior who is a qualified accountant, he can sign off. Back then it wasn't like that. Back then you have to go to an audit firm. Is in ICW is a lot more tougher now. It's still tough because you still need to be registered as ATO. But even then, you know, more and more companies are qualified as ATO. So the choice to qualify is no longer just through audit firm. You can actually, right after you finish your ACCA, you can choose straight away. If you know from the very beginning that you don't want to become an auditor, you want to run industry, you know, my honest opinion, why bother? Because you can go and straight away focus on what you need to do. Because at the end of the day, this is the employer's perspective, right? The entry level for a finance executive is operational finance, which is APAR, accounts payable, accounts receivable. In big companies, you will end up 3 years doing that. So if you are the CFO or the hiring manager or the CEO, right? You know, consider this. Why should I take a qualified ACCA who had spent 3 years in audit firm just doing audit and expect a salary of 4,000 plus, when as far as the skill to do APAR, he or she is as good as those guy umur 21 tahun or 22 tahun who just qualified from Intech. I would actually take that guy because I could pay that guy 3,000. I can teach him, and most probably I do not have to deal with the process to unlearn whatever this guy from audit firm had gone through in 3 years. So this is where, you know, I mean, most of my colleagues from audit firms will not like me for saying this. Your 3 to 4 years experience in audit firm is not necessarily that valuable in the industry. Dulu dia jadi nampak valuable too because you have no choice but to qualify an audit firm, and it's the qualified accountant to yang orang cari. But nowadays, you know, you can qualify anywhere. So as business owners, as someone who runs, as CFO, someone who runs, I need someone who can really do the work. And if I were to groom someone, I would like to take someone yang qualified, ICAW ke, ACCA ke, ICNZ ke. I rather take them fresh and train them 2 tahun dekat APAR, 2 tahun dekat GL, 2 tahun, so that by the time they are 28, they can already manage quite a lot. They have been exposed quite a lot because brain-wise, qualification-wise, they're not that much different from those in audit firm. Whereas if you spend 4 or 5 years in audit firm, lepas tu you baru nak start, umur 26, 27 baru you nak buat APAR. I mean, the guy who did APAR is those guys yang buat 22, 23. So these are the reality of the industry that I don't think many people point out to you guys. You know, so that's why, again, you know, very painful for those working in audit firm. The reality is this. That's why you notice after 3 to 4 years, you susah cari kerja kat luar. I mean, and usually people who take you with that kind of salary is shared services. Because shared services don't mind because you know they can pay you. Shared services selalunya don't really care about career progression because you just focus, you become expert, transactional expert. But kalau you memang choose and you don't mind to become transactional expert and you want to do that for the rest of your life, posting intercompany sampai umur 30, then by all means lah, that's fine with that kind of salary. But if you feel that as a qualified accountant, you want to be CFO, you want, I mean, you don't get much cross-business exposure from shared services because it's very focused. So that's why it's very important for you to plan, especially those in audit firm, how much audit experience that you need. And as far as I'm concerned, after 1.5 years, you buat 10, 20 audit, it's the same thing. After that, it's the same thing over and over and over and over again. And many times you just tengok last year, tiru. Buat last year, tiru. Most of the time, you know. And that's how the industry sees at it. That's why kalau ada 10 so-called categories of finance functions kan, from AP, AR, financial reporting, audit, tax, planning, management reporting, treasury function, corporate finance, fundraising, valuation. If you look at all this, audit is only 1 out of 10. So, you know, if you see from the perspective of business owner, why should I hire and pay someone very high when I have to train her from scratch because she only knows 1 out of 9 things that I need her to do. So that's the reality. And that's also, that's why it goes back to what I mentioned in the beginning. You actually have to decide what's your career path. Kalau you memang nak jadi audit partner, then it's okay. But if you don't want to, then if you allow yourself get stuck, then you actually outmarket yourself by age because you become too expensive. Yeah.
Okay, taking over from this, actually, what are the skills that are actually very important, like for these people to actually move forward? Okay, let's say not because now because our audience is also not all of them from audit firm, so they have like some of them are actually maybe executive, and so some of them are still students. So what are the actual like core skills that they need to actually move forward, and they should acquire within their like 10 years, 5 to 10 years in this profession? Yeah.
You know, I mentioned this earlier, Hanis, right? Okay, the basic requirement for someone to run a finance function is at least three categories, three functions. Operational finance, which is you must have covered accounts payable and accounts receivable. And when I say accounts payable, I mean that the whole process, even the procurement part of it, even the tendering part of it. And that means that, you know, you really need to know about, you know, all the way daripada, you know, PR, PO, semua, how payment works, you know, even cash flow planning. So AP is very important. And nowadays, you know, dengan payment gateway-nya semua kan, dengan a lot of things are computerized. You know, there's a lot of questions being asked here, but you know, I can't read all. So kalau anything, yeah, you can pick up.
I think the main theme, right, Rafizi, is that for those who are in audit 3 years, 4 years in, they feel stuck. As an employer, seeing their profiles, how would you advise them best to sell themselves based on the skill set that they have? You know, that would make them attractive, for example, despite the reality that you just shared, where you rather choose the 21-year-old guy who just graduated from tech.
You have to find the right company, because different companies have different philosophies. The bigger firm don't mind taking someone 25, 26 to start from scratch. So, you know, your better bet is to go for the bigger MNCs and GLCs. But you must be willing to start from scratch. Maksudnya, you have to accept that your competitor is those who fresh graduate. Some of them didn't even do apa nama ni qualification. But the thing about your career project trajectory in bigger organizations, it will be it has its flow. So usually they will put you in APAR dulu. You have to spend like 2-3 years in APAR, and then, you know, after 2-3 years, you have to very quickly try to get into financial accounting or financial reporting, basically doing GL, month-end closing, everything, and audit, financial reporting. After that, usually, you will get to do budgets and management reporting. That's the kind of flow. Now, for those who basically have spent 3 years or 4 years in audit firm, so my advice is this: you can't be picky. If you know that that's the route, you go and take it headlong. Even at 26, you feel like this is a starting point. Well, it is a starting point. Take it and try to be really good at what you do, so that instead of spending 2 years, 3 years in one function, you spend 1 year, 1 year, 1 year. So that you catch up by the time umur you 28, you catch up with those people who spend 2-3 years to 3 years, and then hopefully all your experience, the professional skills that you built during your audit firm will put you far ahead than your competitors, so that then you can overtake them to become the manager or the finance head. That's the only way. The problem is this. The problem is if you think that because you are at audit firm, after 3 to 4 years and you are qualified and you think you are very marketable and you expect something else, then you have a problem. You have no choice. Cuma, the only difference is that if you are lucky, you might find a mid-tier company that can offer you all those experience in shorter time with better pay. Maybe you can join a company that actually have a position that covers both operational finance and financial accounting sekaligus. So that instead of going through one after another, you can try to compress everything in 2-3 years. But the objective is quite straightforward. By the time you are 30, you should have covered those three areas: operational finance, financial accounting and reporting, and management and budget. If you haven't covered that, quite difficult lah. Unless, for example, you choose to specialize, then you can go to you know, advisory firm ke, you can go to venture capital firm ke. But if you are looking with the perspective to be a finance head, when you are mid-30s, CFOs, when you are 40s, you can't escape that because to go back to your question, Rauf, is that in my opinion, you can't be a good finance head just because you observe how other people do it by doing audit. Just because you audit their company it will not make you a good accountant. You actually have to do it from scratch. You have to post it, you have to go through yourself. Quite simple. If you just see from outside and from an auditor's perspective, you just roughly know, the concept. Whereas accounting and finance is all about details. We are the most detailed person. Not even a decimal point should escape us. So if you haven't done it, how do you build that skill that, not even a decimal point can escape you? Because you've been trained professionally just to look at the financial statement and just to think what the control and so on. And even then, is on sampling basis. And even nowadays, less and less sampling. Everything is about conceptual. Whereas running a finance function is very detailed. You should remember who paid you and who didn't pay you. If you haven't done that, you can't appreciate, for example, the operation of finance. And then, in my opinion, you may make a bad finance head eventually.
All right. So at this current juncture, technology is very pervasive. It's also disrupting many industries, even the accounting and auditing industry for that matter. First question is, from an employee's perspective and also as an accountant, what are important skills to have, soft set skills as well as technical knowledge? And the second thing is, how would you advise students, young accountants, to incorporate technology, in their studying or in their daily lives as an accountant? Because we see RPA coming up, for example, within the finance functions. People are asking, is it going to take over my job, or is it going to make the job easier? And now my job becomes a decision-making job because the RPA does all the processing, right? So yes, just a little bit of insights and input on that.
Well, any job, not just finance, require a good communicator. So if you have a problem with communication skill, then you have a problem. So don't even think about all the tech, all the technology, and all the programming. I think at your age, first and foremost, you should really focus on communication skill. Now, when I say communication skill, I don't mean the ability to bullshit. A measure of good finance versus a bad one is this. A bad finance communicator regurgitate the numbers. You just tell what the numbers is. I mean, we don't need you to tell us the numbers. We can actually read it ourselves. But a very good finance communicator will be able to tell what's beyond the numbers, what's beneath the numbers, what drives the numbers, how the numbers make sense to the non-finance. That is a skill that you have to learn from early age. And unfortunately, that skill is not taught. That skill is something that you have to develop out of interest. And that interest is because you want to find out further what this number represents. So the discipline that you must have from the very beginning is that curiosity and inquisitiveness to really make sure that you really know your numbers at the back of your hands, because you really drill the numbers. You go through the root causes to find out exactly why the numbers are like that. And it's not taught in university or in ACCA or ICW or anything. It's a personal character, a personal trait. So develop that first and foremost, because if you are a good finance communicator, you stand like a sore thumb.
Okay, I would say it's an analysis, ability to analyze the numbers, and actually you apply to the business.
Well, not really, Anis. No, I mean, everyone can do analysis. You put on spreadsheet, it gives you all the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
It's ability to really not just understand why certain things are like that, but also to be able to predict and make an impact and make other people understand what it is. So it's, you know, finance people like to talk finance language, lingo. That's bad finance people. A good finance person is able to understand, to explain everything in a layman's term, something that they don't have to know. Don't tell them about impairment. They don't understand impairment. You know, it's like, don't tell them that, oh, financial instrument is this. It doesn't mean anything to a sales guy. If you are a good finance communicator, you will be able to tell them, this is how, if you do your job and if you focus on certain areas, this is how it affects our business. That's what I mean. So you must be able to always put yourself in other people's shoes in order to make sure they understand finance much, much better. And that is one area of communication which is, you know, very lacking in most accountants I come across. So, Raul, if you ask me what is the most important skill, build that skill from the very beginning. The ability to talk to non-finance, a lingo, and make them understand finance like you, which is quite difficult. Okay, that's number one.
Okay.
Number two is that you must know the business that you are in. It's like if you join, katakanlah, palm oil company, you should actually know every single thing about palm oil. You should go and make sure you pernah baja the palm oil tree yourself. Because otherwise you buy ammonium sulfate, you tak pernah tengok ammonium sulfate macam mana. So again, that is the discipline that has to be nurtured from the very beginning. The ability to really understand business beyond the requirements of finance, which, you know, most of the time, finance executive, you join your department, you tak pernah tahu tu. You don't sibuk about depreciation, you know, bayar bills, you don't even know who you bayar bill. You don't even know, you know, how does this fit into my business, kan? So, communication skill, business knowledge is important. To me, after that, barulah kalau you dah build those two, then you start thinking about technology. You know, I wouldn't worry too much about technology because eventually the tech will replace low-level repetitive jobs. So the ones who are at risk are mostly clerks, accounting clerks. In the next 4 or 5 years, accounting clerks, I think, will be phased out because everything will be done by the machines. All these very repetitive, high-volume transaction will be done by the machine. The opposite will happen. What happened will be, because low-level accounting transactions are done by the machines, it will leave the higher-level job to human beings. Cuma the focus will move from someone who just type ataupun post transaction to someone who is able, for example, who is able to design an accounting system, who is able to design those machines who replace human beings. So then you can see that in the future, the quality of accountants and finance will be a lot higher than what you have today. Because sekarang ni, about 60 to 70% of the finance jobs are transactional based. Those jobs will be phased out. But there will be a demand for the people who design the system to replace those transactions. So it requires a lot more than just transaction. It requires concept, it requires understanding of the business, it requires ability to put everything, the whole business stream. Yeah? That's number one. The demand in the future will also be for you know, in-depth specialty in a particular field. So for example, if you work in banking, you know, transaction will be a lot more complicated. You know, Cayman sounds complicated now. I'm sure in the future is a lot more complicated than Caymans and offshore. So the more complicated a transaction is, the less a machine can decipher it. So there will be select group of transactions or business or functions that require human beings because machines cannot handle it. But of course, while there is a new demand for this, the number of people required to do this is quite limited. So it will become very competitive. So what I see in the future is not so much that accountants will be replaced. What I see is that it will get even more competitive, that if you stick to just transactional skill that you have, then you'll be competing with the machine. So you have to know from earlier on that you have to have a high level skill in a particular specific finance area, so that as the demand for that grows because of the complexity of transactions that machines can no longer deal with. For example, one MDB machine cannot trace, all these transactions panjang sangat. It takes a lot of judgment, human judgment.
Yes.
So those areas that require human interpretations and human judgments, the job will still be there. There will be high demand for it, but it will be a lot more competitive. So you have to be much better than the rest in order to get those jobs. But it will pay, the job will be very lucrative compared to whatever we have now. That's the future.
Yeah, so for those who are currently studying accounting, taking an accounting degree, or for that matter, even pursuing an ACCA or an ICW paper, where there potentially might be some deficiencies in terms of exposure to technology, what would your advice be to them to build that gap a little, so that when they start working, they potentially could think of certain technological solutions within, of course, the accounting job that they do, for example. So that they're not left out vis-a-vis what the future entails.
It's quite difficult around because you have to know the reality of the industry, kan? The companies yang are able to afford all these tech ke apa kan, contohnya banking semua kan, a lot of the solutions are provided by technology provider. These are licensed software. So it's not that easy for you to find a job that allows you to give input on technology, to be frank. It's very difficult. Unless you join a tech company yang memang produk dia tech products. I mean, for example, that's what we do at Invoke. So our finance basically get involved directly with developing the product because they have to design the finance module. Because we automate everything for finance, billing, collection, debt scolarization, everything. So they work with the software engineers to develop that. But most companies in Malaysia, especially with legacy system, the finance don't get involved with any of this. Semua ni yang buat ni semua technology provider. And even when they want to upgrade ke apa, maybe very select few finance people yang will be involved just to give maybe user requirements ke apa. But it's unless you are CFO, it's quite difficult to find a planning function that has direct interface and influence on tech and technology at entry level. Okay? So my advice is this, people should focus and take up interest in tech, even if even to the point of start coding yourself, not so much because you think it's needed in finance. It's more because that's the future. In the future, if you cannot code, you are considered, you can't even read. Everyone codes in the future. 20 years down the line, I think budak almost 10 tahun semua can code because it's a requirement. So you should adopt that view, coding, tech, semua, at least a basic understanding about how tech works, how platform works. It's not really because you need it in your job. It's just the world is changing and it has become in the same way that when I was in Form 5, internet, like, space technology, but by now, I mean, even orang kampung pun tahu internet, so back then, the ability to use laptop, computers and internet, it's not really because it's necessity for job or study. It's just because that's where the world is going. So everyone needs to know it. So you are at a stage now that, tech is important, especially coding, it's like, So you don't have to code yourself, but at least you need to be aware about all this, so that one way or another, it becomes like additional premium for you, if you know. But I
Right.
doubt that, you know, at entry level there is much requirement for tech, unless you are in tech companies.
Right. Okay. So this is just to circle a little bit back to the earlier point that you made at the very beginning um, of this discussion, where you talked about planning. When you were in Petronas, your growth was visible, and I would also assume you had a clear pathway or clear runway within the Petronas organization, i.e., what the future could potentially entail. What were some of your considerations when you decided to leave Petronas for another role, considering that clear runway and pathway potentially in Petronas?
Okay, this is, I think, it goes back to the milestone and planning that I mentioned at the beginning. I have covered more or less the biggest chunks of the functions in oil and gas. I've done downstream, and by that means that I've been in plant environment. I've had experience in trades and sales, petrochemical products, and then I've done planning at the corporate level. I've done corporate functions. I've done operational planning, and then I had done hardcore finance, of course. I've done corporate finance, and I also covered upstream, and I also covered international business with various jurisdictions all over the world, and I also covered tax, international tax, everything. So by the time I was like early 30s, it's all bed of roses. If I had stayed, it would have been smooth sailing throughout. Salary was good, but my preoccupation at that age is very much about learning. I felt that I've learned everything that I could learn in Petronas, in oil and gas. And if I had stayed in oil and gas, then I would retire as one hotshot, senior guy. But the only thing I know is oil and gas. At that point of my career, I will be rotated from one senior finance position to another senior finance position, just waiting for me to basically get into the queue. Because I was young, I was the youngest of my batch to be in that position. So in corporate organization, obviously they say, you can wait, it's okay, bagi chance korang lain semua dulu kan semua. So of course it was a good life, because then I will end up becoming GM after another one function after one function after one function kan. But I was only like 30, 31 at that time. I didn't want to be complacent, and I didn't want to retire, albeit you can retire with hundreds of grands pay every month. Just knowing oil and gas. After all, I've covered most of it by then. I roughly know the details and the function. So my preoccupation then was really to learn about other business. That's why my choice of career from Petronas was pharmaceutical, because I really wanted to learn pharmaceutical then. That also explains why after politics, my choice of career is a tech startup, because I really want to know tech. I'm usually very inquisitive about things that I don't know. It's the inquisitive mind. I wanted to learn, because if you stop learning by the time you are 30, you are dead, basically. You have to constantly have the hunger for new things. So your finance function and finance knowledge won't change much. Finance has not changed for the last 1,000 years, basically. Debit credit has been there forever. Unlike engineering, unlike tech, accounting and finance does not evolve as rapidly as other subjects. So, whatever you learn in your younger days will stay like that, most probably sampai you mati. It's like, of course, they change standards here and there, but more or less the same thing. So you need to have a discipline to learn about business and the world, to make sure that your brain keeps on running. And that's the discipline I have. I want to learn new things every time, so that I have a breadth of understanding about how the world works. And the process is the same every time you start into a new industry, into a new business. You start from scratch, and that's where your learning curve is the highest. That's where your brain really works, and that's where you learn the most. So it's basically, it's just because I didn't want to be complacent. I didn't want, and I felt that at that age I could afford to start from scratch and to learn everything from scratch again, and it would be good for me as a person, rather than being stuck, not stuck lah, rather than being complacent in one industry forever. And that was my decision, and I never regret it. I think most people didn't understand why I wanted to leave when supposedly I was at the height of my career. It's like everyone wanted to have the kind of career path that I had, but looking back, if I had stayed, I wouldn't have learned as widely as I had learned in the last 20 years. So, it's a discipline. It's a trait that I've developed from very early on, that, every 5-10 years, you need to learn new things. And that means that if you need to jump, if you need to venture out, you start from scratch. And it's good. Even if you are 60, you can always start from scratch, because your core foundational knowledge is there. Your finance, you just learn new area of the world.
I think for now, we have a lot of questions in the chat box. Or maybe perhaps participants also can start to actually unmute yourself if you have any questions. You want to ask Bro Rafizi here? Okay, I will start off with one of the questions from chat box. Okay, so what is your advice for young accountant who plan to enter politics in the future?
Don't.
Okay.
Because do this first, I mean, if you have not sold a single thing, if you have not created any value that impacts other people, to me, you have no business trying to run other people's life. Okay, don't get me wrong. It doesn't mean that the young people can't take part. You should always participate in the political process, finding out and so on. But if you join politics as a young accountant, too young, there's nothing much that you can bring to the table. You will just end up being a chatterbox, making noise. You need to accumulate a certain degree of knowledge and skill, so that when you become politicians, you can add value to the process, rather than just, trying to get a seat in the parliament. So my advice is, pay attention to what's happening, follow, join the political process, but establish a career first. Satu, you need the financial independence, financial security. Otherwise, you become corrupt, because then you will be dependent on people giving you money just to survive. But more importantly, you need to be able to bring something to the table. And you can only do that after your first 10, 15 years in your career.
Okay. Is there anyone who wants to ask questions, or maybe you want to ask maybe follow-up questions? It's okay. If you want to converse in Malay, maybe it's acceptable, because we have people from all backgrounds here. You can unmute yourself.
Hello.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question on CIMA qualification. What's your take on CIMA qualification? I'm a first-year student at University of Leeds, your alma mater.
You see, back then, it's like, back then, 10, 15, 20 years ago, I've said this before, the competition for qualified accountants ni tak banyak. So CIMA was a very good so-called qualification route, especially for non-finance So I used to encourage engineers, don't go for ACCA, don't go for ICAW back then. If they have become an engineer practicing, but they want to have a qualification to upskill for management roles, SEMA was perfect then, because SEMA focused on the management part. I don't know how SEMA has evolved in the last 10-15 years since I was, I used to run together with other colleagues ICAW program in Petronas. So we used to compare, the syllabus and so on. I don't know whether SEMA has evolved to become almost full-fledged or not. Okay. My comment is this. I don't know whether the industry is as well versed about the diversity of the qualifications, especially now with the, especially with ACCA qualifications flooding the market. Yeah. So my view is still the same. Kalau you are from finance background and you want to do to qualify, it's best to do ACCA or ICAW or if you are from New Zealand or Malaysia, you do MIPA, ICANZ, semua lah. But if you are an engineer or other fields, you don't intend to be in assurance or in audit at all, you need the qualification for your career progression so that you cover the finance part, then SEMA is perfect. That's my view. Yeah.
Okay, I think moving on with Fauzan. Fauzan wants to ask something, okay? Wait. Can I unmute
Okay,
yourself?
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My face on, okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Assalamualaikum.
Hello?
Because right now,
we lost you just now. You were saying?
Okay. You can hear me, YB?
Yeah, I can
Mister?
now. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Then we lose you again. Okay.
Yes, we lost you for then.
Yeah. Very bad internet connection.
Fauzan, may I suggest perhaps you type in your question and we'll
After Okay.
yeah, and we'll read your question out. So perhaps we'll move on to Kamil with his question. Hold on.
Hi YB.
Yeah.
My name
Kamil.
is Kamil Mustafa. Yeah, I met you once, and it's actually in 2018 at Bangsa. I think that time you met with Nurul Izzah. I think that time.
Okay.
Yeah, that day. Yeah, you made my day, I guess.
Yeah, that was a past love.
Yeah. And my question is that apart from the professional qualification that you mentioned, right, like ICAW or ACCA or whatever, what's the special quality an accountant need to differentiate with other accountants or other auditors? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the question. And
quite straightforward, Kamil. It's all about creating value. You have to see from the perspective of the non-accountants. It's like when we hire an accountant, having said that I am an accountant, this is of course, I run businesses. So as owner and as management, we hire accountants to create value, to help us create value. So you can tell straight away the good and the average accountant from the way they manage the finance functions. Those who just regurgitate transactions are bad accountants. Eventually, the machine will do that for you. Press a button and all the report will come out. All the graph, all the visualization will come out. But good accountants are the ones who are able to help the business. Maybe it's quite difficult for you to understand at this stage because you need to be running business to understand that. But for example, there are things macam product development. There are things like market. There are things like even the simplest of things, which is very tricky for businesses, which is cash flow. Good accountants behave as an owner. They are very particular about cash flow. So dia bukan jenis yang bayar duit masuk. It's not routine for them. You know, they think 5, 6, 7 steps ahead about, okay, if my business wants to go there and have to achieve this, okay, what do I need to bring to the table beyond those transactions that I'm monitoring, beyond those transactions that I'm. So a good accountant are basically good business leaders. And for that, you need business skills. And business skills are not something that you can acquire without going through it yourself. So the sooner you dive and immerse yourself in running a business, the better. That's the only thing. The mistake that I think most accountants make at your age is you got stuck doing the routine. And you thought that, you know, being accountants is all about transactions. It's not. It's about being a marketer, it's about being a product developer, it's about being someone who creates value. And those are the good accountants who, if they progress to become CFO or CEO, they make really, really good bosses. So that's why at your early stage of your career, it's very important to quickly build that so-called transactional based knowledge and skill, so that you can start focusing on the business skill. If you got stuck on the so-called transactional type of functions, bila masa you nak start focusing on the business? Yeah. So by the time you nak start, umur 30 lebih, there will be younger ones who are so much better and smarter than you, who most probably run faster than you. So you get bypassed. So just try to cover as much as possible, as soon as possible, so that you can start moving on to the business. Simple.
Okay, one more thing. How can I have a clear pathway like you?
I don't know. Okay, this is my advice. As much as I plan for most things in my life, right? Whatever I get usually is not the objective. You know, I always say this, you know, it's not mine anyway, is John Lennon. John Lennon used to say this: life is what happens to you while you're busy planning other things.
Like your bio caption.
Yeah, so it's like my advice to you guys, the young ones, is this, and it's very transparent among the bosses. If you are so hard up about climbing up the corporate ladder, usually you don't get it, because it's so obvious to bosses that, you know, you are not really doing it, you know, either sincerely or for the good of the company, is because, you know. So what I've focused all along in all my career path so far, not just career path, in everything that I do, you know, I actually focus on the impact and the learning. I just focus so that I can learn as much as possible, so that I can do as best as possible, so that I have the most impact. The fact that you get promoted and you know, get the reward, it's not your objective. It's a byproduct. That's because people recognize you create values and you add value, and therefore it will come to you automatically. So if your focus is about, you know, I want to get this, get that in your career, usually you tak dapat. But focus on, I want to be the best this, the best that, so that when I become this, you know, I can have the best impact on people around me, the best impact on my job. People actually feel the impact of your work. That's what makes you stand out, and that's what people that will you know, guarantee your path, because definitely bosses or organization will pick you because you make an impact. So it's all about making an impact, and you can't make an impact if you don't have the heart at the right place. So those are, I know it sounds philosophical, but that's how I plan everything. Even now, it's like I'm running my tech startup, right? Most founders are so hard up about valuation, because so that the sooner the value grows, and then you can exit, you can say that I'm worth 200 million, 300 million because my tech startup is worth 500 million. That's not my objective. My objective is to really make sure that this team of people can make an impact with the product we are trying to develop, and to make sure that impact is measured by how much impact we are able to change the way society works, society functions. So if we are able to do that, valuation will come automatically, because if your product is good, the adoption is good, then your valuation is good. So make sure you focus on what drives the impact, rather than focus on so-called career progression.
Okay, thank you, YB. You've made my day.
Thanks,
I hope you
Kamil.
follow me.
All right.
Yes. Bye-bye.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank
Thanks,
Thank
Kamil.
you, Kavin.
All right, thank you.
So Rafizi, just circling back to Fauzan's question earlier, his question is that he's currently an intern at an accounting firm.
Okay.
Between being an accountant, an auditor, or someone within the taxation practice, what do you think is the most relevant in this day and age? Or what do you think can create the most impact?
Well, okay, it depends how you define impact. For example, if impact means money, how much money you make, both can make money. Just that taxation is very academic. For you to become a tax partner or tax specialist, you are almost as good as a lawyer. Actually, tax is not really finance. Tax is very legal. It's about reading the tax legislation in detail. So it takes a certain kind of people who will be able to progress beyond the basic tax computation that you start when you first at the entry level, kan? By the time you jadi tax partner, you are, you go through all these tax legislation and so on. So the question to you is that, are you that type of person? Are you very academic enough to read hundreds of pages of tax legislation? I remember back one of the jobs that I had to do, in my last position, Petronas. We had to go and did tax risk assessment for each country that we operate. So we moved from one country to another. Each country we had to read from cover to cover the tax legislation, every tax legislation. The income tax lah, PITA lah, indirect tax lah. So it's almost a lawyer's job, kan? So it's only people who can stand reading hundreds of pages of tax legislation can become a good tax specialist. So kalau you awal-awal start at your entry level, you do buat tax computation, but you tak boleh lepas pun 3 tax punya 3 pages of tax legislation. If you have an ambition to be a tax specialist, it's kind of a mismatch, because you will definitely hate that job. So so in that sense, that's why I said from the very beginning, you really need to know yourself, what kind of person you are. So I feel that not many people are wired to be tax specialists. Not many finance people are wired to be tax specialists. So if you want to proceed in tax, you really have to know what does it take to go all the way up, because it's very repetitive, it's very detailed, it's very academic. Then the choice is quite straightforward. If you're not that type of person, then you should be in finance.
Yeah,
so you should ask that question dulu. Are you very legalistic as a person? And senang je. Try to read Malaysia Income Tax Act from cover to cover. Tengok you survive ke tidak. If you enjoy it for your bedtime reading, then you should stay in tax. Otherwise, maybe you should consider finance generally and not tax.
Okay, Rafizi, I know we've hit the 10:30 mark. We've got 5 more people who've raised their hands. Would you be okay with extending for? Yeah. Okay. So we'll.
It's just that if my son is so bored and if he comes and gate crash, you just have to put up with it lah. because he knows that I'm supposed to end at 10:30, but that's fine. Go
Right.
ahead.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. So we've got one Muhammad Pyros. Perhaps you can share your question. Pyros?
Hi, yes, you can call me Pyrus. Rafizi, I have a question. I'm some sort of like sharing because, like you said, now we have flooded with a lot of like CAs in the market compared to before. And from my experience, I think I recruited a junior finance controller for my position. When I recruited and I interviewed, I think around 15 CAs. Most of them are having 4 to 5 years of experience from Big Fours. But when because I cannot choose, I cannot decide which one is the best. So I give them case study. The case study is more to like performance management, but with a set of numbers. When most of them, when they see the numbers, they are more to like, they are wired to be a bookkeeper. Means like when they see the numbers, they straight away calculate. I don't know what they are calculating for, but they start to calculate and they try and they started to present to me, oh, these are the numbers. Then, but for the controlling or business partnering with management is different kind of like mindset. So what is your take to young accountant, how they should wire their mindset from bookkeeper to be a controller or business partner to the management? I think that's all.
Thanks, Virus. You hit it on the nail. I totally agree. That's exactly basically the challenge of the younger accountants, because you are trained to be bookkeepers. And that's why when you start applying for jobs, I know I saw one comment tadi kata, it's okay kalau you kerja 3-4 tahun dekat audit firm, bila you join audit your client nanti you get management level. I don't know who tells you that. That's not the reality. The reality is what Fairuz just said just now. When you are tested, you are more or less number crunchers. Basically, you do not have the so-called common sense business knowledge, kan? So going back to Fairuz punya question tadi, I think it has to start with this. My advice is for you to know that your preoccupation to pass your qualification or accounting degree is just a prerequisite. Whatever you are tested in your, FRS ke, in your tax, it's just a prerequisite just to get the qualification. The higher level knowledge that will separate you from the others are basically the high level bird's eye thinking that requires you to digest and dissect business world. Because as a finance person, you need to drive the business. As in, companies don't hire you to be bookkeeper. Companies hire you to create value. So for that, you need to go out of your nitty-gritty of the bookkeeping on the numbers and start thinking as a CFO and CEO. So one thing that I think you can start from early on, especially those in university, start an online business. Start selling something, on Lazada, Shopee, not with the view to make money, but with the view to understand the simplest basic challenge of running a business. It's about stock, it's about margin, it's about marketing, it's about, chasing for payments, it's about fulfillment, it's about frictionless sales, Once you have your small business project, you actually get a lot more mature about business. So the sooner you try to be a businessman, the better. And one big mistake is, I blame it on the accounting profession in the country, and they may hate me for that, but I say what I wanted to say. The problem is the accounting profession is still ketinggalan zaman. They still talk about the good old days, zaman Tok Kadut dia dulu. Or if you are qualified, you are set in your ties and so on, like me, will be fine. If you just qualified, you are set up for life. That was in 60s, 70s, 80s, and early 90s. It's no longer the case. Just because you're qualified, it gives you slightly ahead of others, but hardly anything much. So what you need is basically that maturity, so that you can be you are able to manage a business, not to crunch numbers, kan? And unfortunately, because the accounting papers don't really prepare people for that, I think what's the best is actually you go through it yourself, and you don't have to do internship ke apa. The best way is to start your small venture. And the more you understand the challenges of running business, of managing resources, the more you are able, when macam Fairuz kata tadi, once you see a problem, you will be able to go beyond the number crunching and see what drives the business, what drives the problem, and start looking at that level rather than just the number crunching. Is that all right, Fairuz?
Yes, correct. Thank you.
All right. All right.
Right. So next we've got Radi. Radi.
Hello, Rafizi.
Yeah.
Yeah, back to my SEMA question, because like my ultimate goal, because my ultimate goal is to start my own business, to start my own company and stuff. So I don't really want to practice accounting and finance. And
Great.
as I was told, and I did my research on SEMA, I think that's like the closest thing to business, because like ACCA and ICAW, they focus more on financial accounting, and SEMA management accounting. So I guess management accounting is much more needed.
I perfectly agree with you. If you know that that's the career path that you want to take, that you want to run your own business, doing ACCA or ICAW is an overkill, because there will be too many papers about financial accounting, reporting, and then taxation, and then all these kind. SEMA would be perfect for you to give you the broad understanding about running a business, because it will focus more about the management side of things. So yes, if you know straight away that you are not going to practice as an accountant, but you need that skill to run your business, then go for SEMA.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Radi. I think we can move on to Ikwan. Just now he raised his hand. Hello, Ikwan, you there? Okay, Ikwan is not here. Okay, I think we can move on to Tengku. No. Okay, now we actually have a lot of questions, so we might limit our questions for tonight. And okay,
I see some hands still there kan, ada 2-3 tangan. Muzamil.
Ada banyak. Actually, we have listed down according to the, siapa yang raise dulu lah. Yeah, okay. So Tengku is not here. Okay, and then go to Henry. Henry, you can unmute yourself. No? Okay, if not, then we shall move on, because we have a lot of participants here also.
Sorry. Just unmute me.
Okay.
Sure, Rafizi, from what you have shared with us, I think for the accounting, for the young accountant like me and some of the audience here, I think we need to not only understand accounting, but we also need to equip ourselves with law knowledge, or even if you can, if you afford to have a law degree, because now accounting not only managing value for me, but it's also understand the process, how we interact with the authorities. Okay, because everything we did, actually not only the income tax will come about, and maybe bank nagaras will come about, and even SPRM will come about, the MSCC. So I think prepare for the futures, I think we need to become like, I will say, law savvy. Yeah, besides just like number crunching humans, because in terms of number crunching, I don't think that we can do as much as or even better than the machines. What do you think, Rafizi?
Yeah, compliance is part and parcel of being accountant, especially governance and controllership, kan? So just to share my experience, I drafted all my agreements since I was in Petronas. And even now, all my legal, running my startup, when we issue shares or raise financing, corporate finance, I wrote all my legal agreements. Even the constitution of my company, I wrote myself. And so there's no doubt about that. One major part of accounting is statutory compliance, and therefore you need to be able to know everything. You need to know Companies Act at the back of your hands. You need to know Income Tax Act and so on. What I may disagree slightly, Henry, is that I don't actually think you need a law degree for that. I did law degree for 1 year when I was bored at your age. The problem is the so-called law that you need, or that really concerns business. So maybe only 20 to 30%, because the rest are criminal law lah, the rest are tort lah, the rest are contract lawyers lah. It's important, kan? But even then, I don't think that you really need to go in details to remember all the cases, because the way the law education and qualification is designed is really for lawyers. It's not really for business people. So my own experience is that so long as you appreciate earlier on the necessity to appreciate and upskill yourself with legal knowledge, you don't actually need to do law degree, because when you have to take specialized advice, you definitely need a legal firm to do. But rather than depends 100% on a legal officer or an outside firm to advise you, it's best that you yourself has the basic knowledge. And you can do that actually just by reading. You can just read the law yourself, and you can start drafting certain things yourself. It all takes practice. The more you draft legal agreements, the more you draft contracts, the better you will be. And if you work in a bigger organization, you can draft, and then the legal officer can actually vet it for you. That's how I learned my law. So I don't know. I don't think that even CFO needs to have a legal degree. I think it's enough for them to be aware of the law. Your accounting qualification is enough to prep you for any compliance and statutory requirements enacted through these laws.
Thanks, YB Rafizi. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for your sharing.
Okay, thanks, Henry. I think we can move on to Adrian Lim. Adrian, yes, you can unmute yourself and show yourself.
Hi, can you hear me clearly?
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, Rafizi, for this session. I just want to totally agree with you with the groupthink mindset among professional certification holders, because I think with the educational institutions that we're a part of, we're sort of brainwashed to think that the Big Four is the only way to succeed. Now on to my question. With the view of you mentioning that it's either business leaders or specialization, yeah, right. Yeah. And to create value to organizations as the ultimate goal. What is your take on gaining experience from the MBBs, the big three consulting firms, and management and strategy consulting firms, as compared to going into more traditional accounting and finance functions? And to add on to that, would you advise someone to go to the extent of forsaking their typical 3 years of working experience in accounting finance functions to get their qualification, to then pursue these other ventures?
Okay, I think first it depends on your end goal, right? So if your end goal is to want to become a CEO of a big organization, then certainly working for the big consulting boys, makes a lot of difference to your CV. I don't necessarily think that you learn a lot from them, to be frank, because in the early years you will be doing a lot of slides for them, more than anything else, But the good thing is that if you are good enough to join McKinsey or BCG or Bain, most probably you can do pretty much anything in the world, because you are smart enough. And so the premium is not so much because the learning experience in those firms will really prep you up. Is a recognition that you are smart enough and you can pick up a lot of things on your own. And the environment in those consulting firms will basically build that discipline for you. So, you know, if you want to jump corporate ladder with the view that eventually to become CEO of big organization, then yes, skip audit firms, you know, go and join them, because the industry values those consulting firms a lot more than the audit firms. But if your objective is to run your own company and to start create value from scratch, then you may want to skip that, because by nature they will do everything at the highest level. They won't go into the details, operational nitty-gritty, because they, you know, those are the nature of what they do. So the danger if you want to run your own organization and have to start from scratch and have to create things from scratch, and unlike joining big organization where everything is already there, you just need to give some strategic direction at the top. You know, that's what consulting firms do. Then there will be a lot of skill gaps when you start on your own. So if your objective is to say start your company by 35, by 40, my advice is to go to mid-tier firms, mid-tier companies, and really learn everything the hard way. And you know, no matter what people say to you, it's okay, you will win in the long run, even though it's not glamorous and so on. Remember that learning those operational details in your early years will add to the skill that you really require when you start your own venture on your own. So that's why it's very important not to box a career path. It's really important to know where you should go to get the best skills that you need for your objective. And that's why sometimes, you know, I pity your generation, because, you know, not many people tell you that. People tell you one road. If you want, you do this, you do that. It doesn't work like that. You know, so you need to have that confidence to say, I know enough. This is what I want to achieve. I'm going to stick to it. So the first thing is I need to do 1, 2, 3, 2, 4. You know, so if you have to forfeit, you know, glamorous career in the beginning because you have very clear objective what you want to achieve 10 years down the line, go for it. And if you can stick to that path, most probably you'll be very successful in whatever you do later on, because you stick to the plan. All right.
Thank you so much, Rafizi. Yeah, that was
Right.
great. Thank you.
Okay,
Right.
thanks,
So
Adrian.
let's
Okay.
just take one last question from Ami, and then perhaps we can wrap up the discussion. So Ami.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So hi, I'm Ramli. I just want to ask one question. I already asked in the Google form and also at the Zoom chat, but I never noticed. It's okay. So my question is, okay, how far or tangent can I go with professional people? For example, like currently I'm taking ACCA, but my dream is to become like a football agent, something like that. Okay. So like how can I use my ACCA qualification to pursue, for example, football agent or anything that unrelated to accounting? Or should I just pursue a degree related to the things that I want to be, for example? Yeah. Thank you.
Well, my advice would be quite out of the window that you may not expect. You know, my advice is this: complete your ACCA, because I don't know what a football agent pays in this country. You may actually become a football agent, and then you realize that, you know, this is not what I want. At least if you have a ACCA, you have an insurance that you can always go back to the mainstream. Okay? I don't know how football agents works, but I know of a person who is, you know, I used to coach him when he was young for his scholarship and so on. He went to do medicine, And then I think he switched to law. So he did his law degree. Eventually he becomes, he's CEO of the Professional Footballers Association of Malaysia. So I think a starting point, if you really want to pursue a career as football agent, is to actually get in touch with him and figure out, because he may be able to answer you much better than I can ever be. At your age, you have your dream and so on. But you also have to be slightly more pragmatic. If it doesn't kill you to complete your ACCA, you should. Unless you can't really take it that if you continue ACCA you mati, then okay lah, just quit ACCA kan. But otherwise, I don't know how many papers you have left. Be quite pragmatic, because you need that as an insurance. If things don't work out in the future, complete your ACCA. Because I don't think you require any particular qualification to be a football agent. It's basically anyone who has the right connection and who knows how it works should be able to pursue that career well. But in case if it doesn't work out, then you can always fall back to your ACCA qualification.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
So just to bring the discussion to a conclusion, we started the discussion talking about how important planning is with regards to one's career. We talked about important skill sets to have. We covered a little bit about technology. We covered the various finance functions that one ought to cover, in order to potentially be a head of finance or CFO, for example. We spoke about career choices, career transitions, professional papers. So to wrap it all up, Rafizi, what would your advice be to young accountants tonight? What would the key takeaway be?
I think you have to wake up and smell the coffee. Because I think, and that's why most people hate me, because I usually raise the red flag much earlier on than others. The world has changed. And unfortunately, our environment doesn't. And being in Malaysia, it always means that we are 10 years behind most of the time. So, most probably the environment that you are in, the training that you have, the kind of people that you get exposure with, most probably may not be able to convey how fast the world is changing out there. So you always have to be on your toes, and you need to have this discipline that the only thing that doesn't change is change itself. And once you have that discipline to know that everything is very dynamic, then you will be able to not have preconceived conceptions. The problem about career, and especially something as old as finance, maybe 2,000-3,000 years type of career, right? You always have preconceptions about things. It has to be like that. It has to be like this. You jumpa your partner cakap macam ni, your boss cakap macam ni, dekat uni orang cakap macam ni. It's not necessarily true. So if you understand that, then you make it a discipline to find out yourself as much as possible from the world out there, and not to live in that closed environment that you may have. Of course, the challenge is always, where do I ask, where do I get? As I say there are many ways to do it now. Jangan malu, just get crash. Every now and then you might actually find people who are willing to give you a good tips. But once you don't have a preconceived idea about how things will be, and it's as if that the world is static, then I think you will constantly calibrate your expectation and your milestone. Because what's the worst mistake that you can make at your age is that you think life is linear. Life is not linear. And you think that life is a flow and you will float by the flow. Again, it doesn't work like that. It's almost, is almost like a constant iteration of milestones. I say this to many different groups. It's like if you do tech, right? You develop a product, you throw it out, you see how it works, you iterate again, you iterate again, you iterate again. The iteration process is a constant adaptation that you have to get used to, because I don't want to sound like Darwin, but Darwin is right in the sense that the ones who survive is not the most intelligent or the strongest. The ones who survive is the most adaptable. So if you build it from the very beginning, that is a dynamic world that you have to constantly change and adapt, then you will constantly challenge the status quo that you have. You will constantly check, so that then you will set a milestone. You start your career at 22, 23 with a certain milestone. By this, I need to be this. By that, I need to do that. By this time, I need to be able to do that. You have to constantly evaluate that milestone, iterate that milestone, so that after 2 years, you have to ask the question: am I on the right path? That I'm still here? What has changed since then? What have I learned? Do I need to move? Those are the things that you have to constantly iterate and ask and go through, and you do that all the way until you are 60, not just at your age. What is most difficult is to acquire that discipline to begin with. If you can have that discipline when you start your career, then inshallah you'll be fine, because it's the iteration that you will continuously do throughout your career. Then you will always adapt to the changes out there. That's to me the best tip that I can give you guys. Of course, the trick is easier said than done lah. You have to constantly run. You need to have that discipline, and it boils down to that. It boils down to the humility to understand that things change, and whatever we understand now changes next year. Once you have that humility to accept that, then you'll be fine, because you will constantly iterate and calibrate. All right.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Rafizi, for sharing with us your insights throughout the evening. And for all the participants, I believe a link will be shared with all of you containing the recording of this session, so you can replay and revisit. Once again, thanks so much to everyone for joining in with this, and thanks so much to Rafizi as well for sharing his insights. Have a great weekend, everyone. Take care.
Okay, one last question from me.
Oh,
Actually,
right.
Rafizi, will there be any this kind of session in the future? Because I think lots of questions here are unanswered. So yeah, can we expect this kind of dialogue? Maybe in Clubhouse, your Clubhouse, or perhaps anywhere you want to do.
No, I mean I've done a few ones got Clubhouse. But I don't know. I mean, okay, if for example it benefits, then I don't mind. I will find a time and can do it. My only concern is this, is that I don't want to be repetitive. I don't want people to hear listen. So kalau, for example, you guys who organize this, if you feel that there are many things unanswered, that there are things that we need to revisit specifically, I'm more than happy. It's just that I tak nak, for example, people we keep doing the same thing and talk about the same thing over and over again lah, nanti kan. So but yeah, let's see when. Yeah, buy me coffee.
Perhaps they can ask you via Twitter if they have any concern. Kalau nasib baik lah.
Susah. They ikut mood, because I usually work lah kan. It's like selalunya I on Twitter, that's because I'm taking a break and I'm just making mickey of people kan. So it's like dia susah sikit lah. Lagipun Twitter ni panjang, susah nak type tau kan. And I'm not really on Facebook. I don't really check. So actually still lah, kalau for example the best is like to allocate like 2 hours like this, and it's just that kalau there are things yang memang belum lagi jawab, then can always I'm more than happy. All right.
Okay, thanks, Rafizi. Sebab
Oh, good
actually,
thing nobody
kita orang
asked me when I'm going back to politics. At least, yeah.
I didn't dare bring it up
Oh,
lah.
yeah,
Don't.
yeah. Nah, yeah. Please
to
don't.
take off the wrong.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Have a nice
Great.
weekend. Ben wants to say bye-bye. Say bye-bye. Okay. All right. Krakow.
Okay, great.
Okay,
All right. Okay.
thank you.
All right. Bye. Good night.
Bye.
Yeah, thanks for the great session. Bye.